Hello everyone, welcome to the part 2 of Basics of Integration. So in the first video, we saw what are JavaScript objects, what is URL, what is request and response objects, what are HTTP status codes, what is JSON, what is the need of JSON, and about pagination. Now in this video, we'll look at some other topics like serialization and deserialization and communication protocols. So let's get started. Now, before going into the topics, I want to make a statement that everything that is stored in a ServiceNow table is an object in itself. So, let's say I have an incident table in ServiceNow and I have multiple records in that table. So, one thing you have to understand is that each record in that table is a object in itself, and that objects contain different keys like number, assignment group, assign to, and others. So all the fields in a ServiceNow table, you can compare it with the keys of an object and the values in that field as the values for the keys in object. So both these things are analogous, right? Now let's move to our topics. So the first thing is serialization. So what is serialization? The process of converting an object or data structure into a format that can be easily stored or transmitted, like JSON, XML, or binary. So in the previous video, I told you that whatever data we share between client and server, we do it using JSON, right? Now the data that is stored in the servers is in the format of objects. Like in ServiceNow, I told you we have objects. Now, if we want to send data through network in JSON format, we first require to convert our object data into JSON, right? Before sending it to server. So this process of converting this data from object to a JSON is known as serialization. Similar to serialization, we have a concept of deserialization. That is totally reverse of what serialization is. So the process of converting JSON data back to a JavaScript object or objects in general is known as deserialization. To convert this object data to JSON, we use JSON.stringify method in JavaScript. While for deserialization, we use JSON.parse method. In JSON.stringify method, we pass the object name. Like in the example, we are sending person object and it is converting that person object into a JSON. And similarly, in JSON.parse, we send our JSON string, which converts it into a JavaScript object. Coming to our next topic, that is communication protocols. So, there are multiple protocols like HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, SMTP, etc. Now, what these protocols are? These protocols are some basic set of rules, you can say, that tells us how data is exchanged between system over a network. Now, let's understand about each one of them. When you will start your integration journey in ServiceNow or in any other tool, you will always come around these three terms: REST, SOAP, or GraphQL. Now let us understand what these terms actually are. So REST is a kind of architectural style, while SOAP is a protocol, while GraphQL is a query language. REST is stateless and it uses HTTP methods like get, post, etc. We already learned about these methods in our previous videos. Now there is a term known as stateless. What does that term actually means? So a RESTful system is stateless when the server does not retain any information about the client between requests. Instead, each request must be self-contained, carrying all information needed for the server to understand and process it on its own. Every HTTP request is independent and isolated. The server treats each one as new with no context from previous interactions, right? While SOAP is very strict. So there are very strict rules for SOAP, and it uses HTTP or other protocols like FTP and SMTP. Now, there are many other things on which you can differentiate all these things: REST, SOAP, and GraphQL. Coming to our next topic, REST versus SOAP. So, till now, we have learned a lot of things about REST. Like we saw what is a URL, what are path parameters, what are query parameters, and all. Now, in this, let us look SOAP in some depth. So, the abbreviation SOAP stands for Simple Object Access Protocol, a protocol for granting access to web services. To connect and exchange data, Access Protocol uses typically XML information set. So, like you can see in the image as well, the data is sent in the XML format in SOAP. A SOAP protocol is comprised of three parts: an envelope, encoding rules, and conventions. An envelope is the instruction for message processing and its structure. Encoding rules tells defining specifics of data transfers for particular instances and data types, while convention is used for managing calls and responses to execute procedures. So in the image you can see the REST URL. In the URL we send path parameters that tells us the path of the resource or the data, while the query parameters tells us what all filters we need to apply to the data, right? So let's say I have an incident table. So first I will give the path to the incident table, and then I'll give what all query I want or what all filter I want to apply in that table through query parameters. Now in SOAP you can see the payload is very long here, right? We have, and the first thing is the the format is XML, in which you can see module, action, and an ID. So action tells you what action you actually want to perform in the server, while ID tells you at which region or for which user you want to perform the operation. So in the high level, you can say that SOAP is like an envelope, while REST is like a postcard. So analogous to an envelope, the SOAP APIs con- contains extra overhead. They require more bandwidth over network and more work on both ends, both at the client side as well as server side is required. While in case of REST, these are lightweight, these can be cached very easily, and they are easier to update as well. Coming to our next topic, REST versus GraphQL. Now these two differentiate majorly on these two areas. First, they both have different handling of endpoints. In REST, the endpoint is tied to the identity of a data or a resource. That means lots of endpoints with specific shapes. So let's say I want to fetch data from incident table. First, with the query name equals to Alice. So, and the second data that I want to fetch from the incident table itself is give me all the incident records where state is active. So for these two cases, I have to create different endpoints. While in GraphQL, we don't require multiple endpoints. We just need one endpoint regardless of the query's complexity. The second difference is different handling of resources. In REST, the server determines the shape of the resource. When a client asks for a resource, it can result in the return of too much or too little information. That is known as overfetching or underfetching. While in GraphQL, the server declares what resource exists and the client asks for what it needs. That makes it easier to receive more specific data from the server in case of GraphQL APIs. So let's understand this thing with an example. We'll take the same example of incident table. So let's say I want data from incident table with state equals to active. So in REST API, we want all the record, but we only want the first name and last name of all those records. But in case of REST API, we'll receive complete records that contains all the information, first name, last name, middle name, email, relationship status, and many other fields. While in case of Graph APL, we can just send the query that we want only these two fields and not all the fields from those two records. So it will only fetch you the first name and last name. So what this does is it saves us from overfetching. So this is the use of GraphQL APIs. So that is all for this video. From next video onwards, we'll start into integration in ServiceNow. How to actually implement integration and how to do integration in ServiceNow. So stay tuned in the playlist. Thank you.